It's the fourth round, it's the decisive day, it's tiebreak time, and we are going to have a look at a game between two top favorites in this event. Hikaru Nakamura, second seed, playing with the white pieces in the tiebreak with Praggnanandhaa, the rising star from India. He is a really tough opponent for Hikaru, and after two draws in the classical portion, we are now going to have a look at the two games which were played on the day of the tiebreaks with a rapid time control, 25 minutes each plus 10 seconds per move. And of course, Hikaru is well known for his skills at speed chess, but don't rule out Prag. He is really dangerous opponent, and we are going to see what happened in this game before you just subscribe to the channel, because I want to get these 1,000 subscribers before the end of the World Cup, and we are gonna get it, and much more, of course. Hikaru starts with 1c4, knight f6, knight c3, e5. It's the English opening, and we get the so-called four knights variation. Very solid line, at least that's how it starts. But wait a second, guys, in just a few moves the board will be on fire. White goes g3, and now bishop b4 is one of the more sensible continuations, and you would expect white to castle kingside very quickly, starting with the move bishop g2. But instead, white gives priority to the move knight d5, attacking the bishop, but also just occupying the center, but giving black the opportunity to push the pawn to e4. We are ignoring the bishop. We instead attack that knight on f3. The knight goes to h4. This may look strange if you see this for the first time, but both players are familiar with this topical line in this opening. Black castled, bishop to g2. So the idea is maybe not even to take on b4, but rather try to complete development as quickly as possible. Black goes for the move d6, and interestingly, this was all seen before in an earlier game of Hikaru played in Moscow 2016 against Vishy Anand at the Candidates event, which was a very interesting game, which was won by Hikaru, and in that game he went for the move a3. Now, instead of playing a3, and it's a very interesting and complicated line, instead he decides to castle kingside, which is also perfectly playable, of course. The idea is that if black is going to take on d5, your knight is under threat, the knight goes away, and the pawn on e4 is gone. So that is not what black should do. But wait a second, what is happening here? This knight at the side of the board, it's almost stranded, and black played here the move g5. The knight is trapped, it's under threat, it cannot go anywhere because the pawn on e4 covers the f3 square while the bishop covers the f5 square. The knight can't go anywhere, which means the knight is lost. But this cannot be true, right? This is, I mean, this really happened, but what is white supposed to do here? Well, it's such a tricky line, and there are so many different move orders that Hikaru kind of messed up his preparation, as the key move here for white is to ignore the threat and just strike back in the center with this move d4. You may think, what is the idea? What happens if you take on h4? Well, then there's this move bishop g5. You're pinning the knight on f6, and together with the knight and bishop, you're threatening to regain the material, and black's king is wide open. That is game over. And the same happens with other captures as well. If you take the pawn on d3, capturing en passant, his bishop takes g5, and the knight is rescued as well. It's game over. The key move instead here for black is to save that pawn on g5. With the move h6, you're supporting that pawn on g5. Now the key idea is that there is the move a3. You're attacking the bishop, the knight cannot be saved, but after bishop to a5, you may drop back with the knight to e3. Remarkable idea, so that you're planning to land on with your knight on the f5 square. So black is gonna take, black is a piece up, but not for long, as after the move b4, bishop is under threat, and if you go bishop b6, there's the move c5, and you're going to regain the bishop. Very complicated stuff. This was seen all before in earlier games, amongst others, game between Caruana with the white pieces against AC Penko in Wijk aan Zee 2021. So d4 is a critical move, and what you have to realize also is that something like knight takes d5 is also not good, because of c takes d5, You're attacking the knight. If knight goes back to b8, it's the key idea. The knight never really goes to e7 because then the pawn on g5 will be taken. If knight goes to b8, believing that the knight on h4 is still stranded, then white can still play the move queen a4. And after that the bishop is trapped, after a5, only move to save the bishop, you go for the move a3. White's going to lose the knight, but black is going to lose the bishop. This is something kind of standard theory. I mean, if you see this for the first time, it's really looking absolutely insane. But most top players, they're familiar with it. But instead, Hikaru didn't play the move d4. He went for the move a3 right away, attacking the bishop. But the bishop goes back to a5. And that makes a huge difference because the knight is still kind of stranded. If you play here the move b4, the bishop goes to b6. You can take the bishop, but after a b6, then your knight is still hanging. While in case of d4, with the idea to meet taking on h4 with the move c5, bishop is trapped. But now black can just take on d5. And after taking back on d5, the knight goes away and the knight on h4 is still hanging. So that is simply not possible. Also, other options are just not going to work. If you play the move d4, I'm going to take first on d5, because the idea is that I don't want white to have that c-pawn to trap the bishop later with b4 and c5. Therefore you take on d5, c takes, knight goes away, and if you play queen a4 now, the bishop can just go back to b6, everything is protected, knight is hanging, it's game over. Hikaru must have realized that things had gone wrong. Play the move d3 instead to try to open up the center, challenging the pawn on e4. Of course, after taking the knight on h4 is bishop g5, and we have seen this pattern before. The knight is pinned and it's going to be game over. But Pragg, cool as he is, he just captured on d5. That is the main trick. After c takes d5, your knight is on the threat. Knight goes back to b8. It's of course not ideal, but it's just for a few more moves and you will be rewarded as the knight on h4 will be captured. Nothing you can do against it. White bluffed here a bit with d takes e4. G takes h4, and now was hoping to generate some sort of counterattack with the bishop, hitting the rook, but more likely hoping to get the queen over to threaten something against the black king. Rook e8, you can stick to the material, G takes h4, queen takes h4, and, well, we can do the material count. It's very simple. Black is a piece up, of course, it's a matter of time. You still need to get these pieces involved as well. Queen c1. Played with the idea to support the bishop. Black goes f6. I like that move, preventing bishop g5 ideas anytime. King h1. This is the sort of desperate attack white is looking for. Knight goes to d7. And here Hikaru played bishop f4. Should be pointed out that if you go for the move rook g1, you should be careful. You should not be afraid of this line, of this file, because if you go away with the king, there is this move, bishop f3, and the huge threat is to give a check on g7, and after king g8, it's bishop takes f6 with check, and you're winning the queen. Very nice idea. If you go rook g8, rooks will be swapped, and then the queen comes over to g1, followed by queen g7, and white is delivering a mating attack. The alternative is to cover the g7 square with your rook, but now the rook comes into g4 with gain of time. That is a painful threat. If you go queen h3, it's queen to g1, threatening checkmate, for instance. And if queen h5, then of course you place your queen in a battery. There is rook g8, king takes, bishop takes h5. It's game over. Let's go back. Rook g1 could have been a nice practical attempt, but I'm pretty sure that Pragg had all seen this and he was not going to play the move king h8. No need to panic. You can just bring your knight into the game, knight e5, so that after bishop f3, the knight comes over to g6, blocks the g file. The bishop is going to be released very soon. Rook cannot come to g4, bishop covers it, so black is just technically a piece up. Instead, Hikaru went for bishop f4, and after knight e5, the bishop went to g3, attacking the queen, queen h5, but black doesn't have any difficulties consolidating its position. Rook g1, knight g6, everything going according to plan. White goes for the move f4, hoping for a desperate counterattack. And now it's time to be precise. Don't be too greedy. You should not be interested in taking that pawn, as that allows white to play the move f5. And If you're careless and move your knight away, then we are going to clear the g file so that we are able to give a check with our rook. First we take the knight on e5. Black recaptures. There is bishop to f3 with check, and the queen is gone. So instead there followed bishop b6, and that's a very sensible move as well. You're attacking the rook on g1. You play e3 to close the diagonal, and now the king comes to f7. You can see that black is having everything under control. These pawns, they may look impressive, but they are not able to come forward, even though Hikaru tried to open up the position, trying to challenge the black king, but black has too many pieces around. d5, fe5, knight e5. Still, your piece up, queen c3, bishop h3. That's the next step. We are completing our development as black and aim for the exchange of pieces. Rook af1, take on g2 with check, rook takes, and now it's knight g4. The knight is doing excellently, opening up the e file for the rook. Idea is to take on e3 anytime soon, although if you take with the knight, you got to be careful not to allow white capturing on f7. So maybe the knight is just best placed on g4. d6 was played, cd6, queen b3 check. Now you can just close the diagonal with the pawn. The pawn is protected by the queen. Queen a4, hoping maybe for some check there. But okay, rook e4 is a good move. Everything is perfectly covered. Queen d1 back, bishop takes, e3. That's another pawn. a4, I mean, I'm not sure what Hikaru was thinking, but he was really mad with himself here probably. Rook a e8, black is having the initiative and an extra piece and an extra pawn. Queen b3, b6, protecting the pawn, queen b5, bishop d4. And here Hikaru had seen enough. He just resigned. I mean, you may think why he picks this moment to resign. There are other moments he could have done that as well. But it is completely hopeless. Knight e3 is on the agenda, forking the two rooks, and anyway, your material up, pieces will be traded off very soon. So this is a huge victory for black, starting this mini tiebreak with a black victory against Hikaru. That puts the American Grandmaster in a must-win situation with the black pieces. And let's see what happened in the second game. Pragg, playing with the white pieces, is having enough with a draw, so he can play very solid, and that's what he does. At least he tries to do, and Hikaru was trying to stir things up. He's going for the pair defense, d4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop c4. Very solid way of playing. Now after knight c6, black is hoping to get in bishop g4 to pressurize the pawn on d4, pinning the knight on f3. But h3 is one of the most solid continuations, especially in this situation. I think Pragg made an excellent choice by playing this move. Knight f6, and here the move queen e2, protecting the pawn. Black went for the move e5, d takes e5, also just a very annoying move to face. You may argue this is something black should not have gone for, allowing the exchange of pawns leading to a symmetrical pawn structure, but otherwise, maybe white's going to play e5 himself and look for ways to grab the initiative by advancing the pawn. After e5, d e5, big question is, are you going to take with the knight first or with the pawn? Well, Hikaru took with the pawn. In hindsight, maybe knight takes. Trading of the knights would have been a slightly better continuation, but being in a must-win situation is also understandable. You keep pieces on the board. But after castling kingside, rook d1, you're attacking the queen. And, well, there's this option to move your queen. But in any case, the knight will come to c3 now. And black is unable to place a pawn on c6 because the knight is there on c6. And that means that anytime knight d5 can be played. I think that's very annoying. Black instead went for bishop d7. But this is also not what you want to do, as black plays your bishop in a pin. After knight c3, the queen went to c8. Stepping out of the d file, maybe there are some sacrifices possible, but it doesn't make sense to sacrifice if your other pieces are not in a great position anyway. Bishop g5 is an excellent move, rook e8. And here, if you just go for the move rook d2, intending to double, I think only white can be better. If you compare both sides' pieces, it's clear that white is just more active. But Pragg, being in a draw is enough situation, played here the move knight d5, just aiming for simplifications. For instance, if you trade off everything, you keep the symmetry. That's a good thing to do here as white. And I really don't see how to do something with black. If you play knight d4, everything gets swapped. I'm going to play queen f3. I'm going to play bishop f6 to trade off the bishops. Maybe later the pawn on d4 will be taken. There are absolutely zero winning chances here for black. So Hikaru, desperate as he is, considering the situation he is in, he played knight h5, queen d2, also queen e3 could have been a more ambitious move, but placing the queen on the d file sets some threats like knight takes c7, followed by taking the bishop. So bishop went to e6, and now bishop goes to b5. Pinning that knight on c6, black played f6, white's going to exchange the pieces. That's a good idea. Now, remarkable move by Hikaru. He played king h8. Frankly, I don't really understand the idea of this move at all. But anyway, white is going to take. Now you take with the king, queen c3. And once again, we are comparing the pieces. White is exerting pressure against the knight. And after bishop goes back to d7, now it's time to bring in the other rook. Rook d2, intending to double. Black goes a6. No need to trade off the bishop for the knight. The bishop is doing well. b5, bishop goes back to b3. I think this pawn weakness can only backfire later on. Black played rook to a7. I mean, I really don't get it, but you want to protect the pawn and be able to move your knight from c6. Rook a1, knight b8. What is going on here? Maybe c6 is on the agenda, but queen c5, you're hitting the rook. Everything is badly placed. Queen b7. And now Pragg comes up with a brilliant idea. Maybe not brilliant, but just really powerful. He played the move g4, attacking the knight. If the knight goes to f4, it's the only available square. You just whip it off, and then look at these two rooks. You're able to take on d7, and you get a crushing attack here with rook takes. The king goes back into the corner. You have two pieces for the rook, but look at this piece. It's just out of play, and with beautiful shocker, knight g5, you're threatening checkmate on h7 with your rook. The bishop covers the g8 square. Knight and rook are attacking the pawn on h7. If f takes g5, it's queen to d4 with a beautiful checkmating pattern. It didn't happen, but you understand how bad black's position is, especially if the d file will be open for the two rooks. In the game, there followed the move c6, counter-attacking the knight. If knight goes away, black's knight may come in to the f4 square. That happened, knight b6, but now it's knight f4, knight takes d7, and black is losing material, because if you recapture, it's rook takes, queen takes, rook takes, rook takes. It's a position with a queen and bishop versus two rooks, which is technically winning. You can grab more pawns, and obviously something like rook d1 is not going to be anything. There's king h2, and there are never any counter threats. Black is completely busted here. So after knight takes d7, white wins material. It's game over. Black could have resigned here, but out of frustration, Hikaru kept on playing for 15 more moves. Played the move a5, maybe trying to trap the bishop. White's going to exchange pieces. And then, look at this. This is so elegant. There are various ways to convert, but aiming for simplifications is really beautiful. Queen takes a7, getting rid of that rook. Queen takes rook d7. With this beautiful queen sacrifice, you're winning the queen back. Queen takes d7, rook takes d7, and white is still a piece up. Everything is winning, but Pragg, of course, finishes it in style. He goes for g5, pawn takes, knight takes, threatening knight g4 check, king h5, rook takes h7. So black gives away that pawn, h takes g4. Now it's a piece and a pawn. It's just way too much. I'm just going forward to the end of the game because this is absolutely ridiculous to play on. But in a tiebreak, of course, it's justified. It's your only chance trying to survive. Knight e3, black is trying to trap the bishop, but the bishop can just go to f7, h4, king h2, knight e2, bishop e6, b4, rook f7. All of a sudden, we are creating a mating construction. Knight goes to d4, we play f4 check. King goes to the side of the board, and here it's bishop to f5, threatening checkmate on h7. Beautiful cooperation of rook and bishop, and of course the only way to avoid mate is to take on f5, but then you recapture. Black is not having any pieces left to survive, and having lost already that first tiebreak game, Hikaru resigned and he is out of the World Cup. This is probably the biggest upset of the round so far. Actually, I think I should apologize for saying that, because Praggnanandhaa is just one of the strongest players in the world. Maybe he's not as strong as Hikaru and Magnus on a good day, but definitely close in rating. But on a good day, he is really, really strong and capable of outplaying these guys. Kudos to him, congratulations to him, and definitely we are going to see more of him in the next couple of rounds. And I would like to see you back on the channel as well. So make sure to subscribe and we continue with the coverage of this World Cup.